and blue for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
You're listening to the Pros and Cons podcast
with CHrissie and Aaron Kahn.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Aaron and CHrissie Kahn for the Pros and Cons podcast. We are on episode 3. There's always IVF, or in vitro fertilization. I think I got that correct this time. So here I am with, like I said, my co-host CHrissie.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 3. And again, we're continuing our sequence with really bad advice that you get while you're on your infertility journey. And people often say, oh, there's always IVF. Just go ahead and do IVF. Have you heard of IVF? Yes, so IVF is in vitro fertilization. And today we're going to walk you through that process and what it looked like for us. I think we did 5 or 6 rounds of in vitro fertilization.
Six rounds.
6 rounds. Oh, they add up so fast.
They do. And they kind of blend together too. So.
They sure do.
Yeah.
And so, honey, do you want to share how many births a year IVF is responsible for?
Yeah, sure. So the CDC reports that 2% of all U.S. births annually, that's every year, are resulting from IVF. That's about 4 million people.
4
million babies.
Million babies through IVF.
And, you know, and again, that's just the United States, because that's just the CDC reports. And that's, you know, just right here in the good old US of A. And that's a lot of babies. That's a lot of babies. It's become a huge industry. And in fact, it costs a lot of money. And we're going to go ahead and break down the costs for you, because we always like to ground people in reality, and the best way to do that is with numbers and statistics.
Especially because it really added up for us.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, eventually we had to file bankruptcy and after spending over $30,000 and trying to be parents. And we just want to be real so you know what you're in for. And so, Aaron, do you want to share the cost for one cycle? One IVF cycle.
Just one IVF cycle, sans insurance, is about $12,000. And that, you know, that's like on the low end of things. That's for like, you know, sometimes it can cost up to like $15,000 for one cycle. So like what we're looking at really here is 12 is like mid-range. The low end is about $10,000. It depends on who you go to. It depends on the facility, the size of it, and so on and so forth. Because like we went to the Fertility Center of Maryland first, and they were I think a little bit on the cheaper end.
Yes.
As compared to when we went to Shady Grove after that, which was definitely more expensive. But that's because that place is like crazy advanced
baby making
machine
hub
of like the Eastern Seaboard.
Yes.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Those numbers, just to note, though, do not reflect the cost of medication.
Correct.
So be prepared. You're going to get a box full of medication and needles and all these things you just never dreamed you'd have to encounter.
That's right. And it's so many needles, you guys. It's so many needles.
So many needles. So Aaron was the needle person, so he will have more info on that. But medications without insurance can be up to $1,500 per cycle.
Yep.
Again, we're just talking about one cycle. And the really important thing I want you to know, because I was very naive going into IVF, I just thought, oh, great, you know, we'll just do one cycle and become pregnant and get our baby, and that'll be it.
No. Not even a little.
No, and what you need to know about IVF is your fertility center is learning your body. They are learning why you're not able to conceive. They're trying to figure out the medications that are best going to promote follicles, which we're going to get to later on. But they're trying to figure out what's going to work for you. And often most people do not become pregnant on the first IVF cycle.
It is extremely rare.
Know that going in, you're probably going to have to do multiple IVF cycles.
Oh, yeah.
and then you won't set yourself up, for being super, super disappointed.
Right.
Like we were, of course.
We were just like, this was supposed to work without the IVF, and now we've done IVF, but it's still not working?
Nope.
Oh, boy.
And so the other thing is, even with insurance, we were still asked for each cycle to put a down payment of around $2,000 for the cycle, and then the medications still cost about $150. So, right off the bat with insurance, you're looking about, $2,200.
Easy.
So just, don't have a heart attack when they ask you to hand you, that down payment. And you will have to talk to, like we talked about last time, when you meet with the fertility center, their financial people will sit down with you and go over everything, because they will not start that cycle until you have paid.
No, they need to see that cash.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's a business.
It is a business, a baby-making business. And because we like to be logical and concrete with you, we're going to go through the steps. Last time we really focused on the differences in fertility centers, small fertility centers, large fertility center. Your step one is that consultation with whatever fertility center you choose. And please, choose a doctor that you feel is going to best meet your situation and your needs. You want to make sure you feel comfortable asking questions, being heard. If you don't, go to another fertility center.
Yeah, definitely. You have to be comfortable with the people you're working with there, because you're going to be there a lot.
Yeah, and that's for ladies and their partners. It needs to be a good fit for both.
You guys, you better step up and be with your partner throughout all this, because it's a lot. It's very taxing emotionally.
It is.
And people need their partner with them.
So after you choose your fertility specialist, your fertility center, you're going to move on to step two. And we hit on this a little bit last time with the baseline blood work and ultrasounds. Ladies, you might even do what's called a mock embryo transfer. We did not do that at Fertility Center in Maryland. Probably should have. Would have saved a lot of issues.
Yeah.
We did that at Shady Grove. What that is they're just doing a mock trial run of what it's going to look like at the end when you go to transfer your embryo, because they need to know, what kind of tubes they're going to use and all the technicalities.
That's that part about getting to know your body and figuring out, because it's all everybody's different.
Absolutely.
And you might have some extra complications that they're going to have to know about prior to the actual surgery.
And again, we found out I did, and did not know that going in.
Quite a bit.
So step two, though, is really about your baseline blood work and ultrasound. Mm-hmm. You will have this happen, ladies, around the time of your cycle. The reason is because they want to know naturally, how are your ovarian follicles? And that is a word I heard a lot in our first round of follicle. Follicle. And I'm like, okay, I know follicle is a hair on my head. What is it doing in fertility? So what follicles are is they hold the eggs for your reproduction. And they're extremely important in the IVF cycle. So everything you're working through, you're trying to get follicles. Mm-hmm. Because that means the more that you have, the more eggs they're going to likely retrieve. And then those eggs can be fertilized with your partner's sample and hopefully result in quality embryos. And that's the baby. That's what you want. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to see, okay, how many do you produce on your own without the help of medication? And so once they have that information, they will be able to tell you the best combo of medications for your cycle. Now, I will say our first rounds, they use one set medications for us, and it looked good. And then after egg retrieval, we did not get quality embryos. And so for cycles 2 and 3, they changed our medication regimen. And so that really helped because, we got pregnant off of cycle 2. We had a miscarriage, but, we got pregnant. We had
closer.
Yeah. We had one left over. And then we got pregnant again and had another miscarriage.
Right.
So that's what they're doing with that baseline blood work and ultrasounds. And, ladies, just get used to it, because I used to say, you're going to start your morning and you're going to have a needle in your arm and your pants down and a thing up your hoo-ha. And it's just like, good morning. And so that is going to be pretty much every day for your IVF cycle. So that is step 3. Or step 2. Then we're moving on to step 3. Before you get to step 3, you will get a medication calendar that will look like calculus. And for me, I'm not a math person. I have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree. Every time I saw this stupid medication calendar, it did not make any sense to me. Thankfully, my partner, he grew up in a medical household. And he was able to decipher it. Honey, do you want to talk a little bit about the medication calendar?
So it basically just gives you, it looks really confusing because they have to do like the shorthand for all the types of medication. And then they also do like the dosage and like at what time you're supposed to do all that stuff. And that if they're good, they'll also tell you like what gauge of needle to use. And because that also varies widely and is extremely crucial to actually properly administering the medication that you're getting. And you want to do it right, because this stuff, like we were saying earlier, bringing it back to cost, it's $1,500 for just medication alone. And if you don't if you don't have to do more rounds of IVF, don't. So you got to make sure that you follow the medication calendar correctly. And if you have a hard time deciphering what's going on there, definitely try to ask the actual the doctor about like how to break that down. The nurses will be a little bit more curt with you. They probably won't give you a whole lot of time with that. But if you ask the doctor, typically they'll take the time to say like, okay, so here's how much you're doing. Here's what gauge of needle to use. Here's the mixture, because we'll get into all that stuff. But that's basically what you need to know about the calendar. It's extremely important because, like I said, you don't want to do more cycles if you don't have to. No,
and with some fertility centers, they'll give you some resources before you start and maybe some videos. They do not like it if you take videos there.
Nope, that's HIPAA. That's a HIPAA violation, hardcore.
I'm a visual learner,
right.
So I wanted to see it. But the other important thing is you want to be able to reach your fertility center anytime to ask them a question. So if you're at a fertility center and it's really hard to get in touch with them, they're probably not the right ones for you.
That's totally correct.
You never know what's going to happen. And I know, for us, we had some hiccups with the medication and we really needed to talk to someone, and we were able to get our fertility center in Maryland right away.
They were very good about answering the phones over there.
Honey, do you want to explain, you always talk about the needle, the smaller it is, the bigger it is.
So, yeah, sure. Just real quick, basic medication stuff is that the larger the number for the gauge of the needle, the smaller the needle is. So if you get like, if you look at your calendar, it's like, oh, it just says a 7-gauge needle. That's not that 7. 7's like this big. 7's huge. That's intramuscular.
You will get that.
You will
get that.
But if you see 22-gauge needle, that's actually that's a tiny one, and that's actually more commonly used. But like that trigger shot, that's going to be like a 7. And that's when we have to like bite real down into the muscle tissue.
Yeah.
And it's extremely uncomfortable and kind of harrowing if you've never handled a needle before.
Yes. So kudos to everybody there handling the needles,
right.
The partners. Again, I was very blessed. Aaron did all that. I know some women who do it themselves. I know some who have friends who are nurses come over and do it. For anybody helping with that process, bless you. Thank you.
Bless you. Bless you.
Moving on to step 3. This is the most important, the ovarian stimulation.
Ooh, boy.
Yeah.
Doesn't that sound nice?
Oh, lovely. It's not nice.
No.
It's not nice at all. And it makes me think of a favorite song. I'm only going to say it 3 times.
Yep.
Shots, shots, shots.
And then we have to cut it off there because we don't have licensing for this song. We don't want to get sued.
Correct. Except not shots for everybody. just you ladies.
Just the ladies, guys. We don't get shots.
Just the female gets the shots. And so this is where you are following that medication calendar, and your partner is injecting sometimes between 2 to 4 shots a day around, your abdomen. And ladies, I would just say, pinch your tummy wherever they're going to do the shot, and make sure you go from side to side because you're going to bruise.
It's just going to happen. You only have so much real estate that you're working with. And,
absolutely.
Bruising is going to happen.
And it's just, it's really hard. It's really hard to wake up every morning and have your blood taken and then have an ultrasound and also have had your shots already, 2 in the morning, 2 at night. But while you're going through it, you're so focused on doing these steps because you think, oh, it's going to lead to me being a mom.
Right.
I'm going to do this because it's going to lead to me being a mom. So you're like really determined and so focused on that. The problem is you're being shot full of all these hormones and you literally feel like a gumball machine. So your ovaries are building these follicles and it's just like, oh, like you're just like ready to burst. So
gumball machine. I don't think I'd ever heard you use that before, but that's
I
hilarious.
have in my head, but it did not feel pleasant.
Yes.
And you are not pleasant around this time.
You can even be, some would say, like dangerously unbalanced sometimes.
Indeed. So I look back and I'm like, how in the heck did I do this so many times while being an assistant principal?
Yeah, we were all
in charge of a school with like 40 teachers and over 500 kids. But I was blessed with my staff. They knew my journey.
You were very open about it. It's not like it was a mystery.
Yeah, and so they knew when I was a little bit more hormonal than usual.
They could tell.
Help me through it. I mean, I'm usually hormonal, but it was way worse. So let's say you get through this, and you have a whole lot of follicles, and they'll tell you. So that's the other thing we kind of left out, honey. Do you want to talk about like what you're looking at during the ultrasound, how they measure the follicles?
That's going to be really hard to describe, but effectively what you're going to see is the ultrasound technician going through with a little cursor over these dark spots all over the screen. And what she's doing is she's measuring the follicles where the eggs sit, basically like little egg sacs inside of your uterus. And what they're doing is just making sure that the follicles are of a size that would be suitable enough for a good amount of eggs. And they're kind of just like mapping that out for the purposes of being able to figure out where they are so that they have a game plan for when they go in for the actual egg retrieval.
Thank you. And, sometimes you'll hear like, oh, you have beautiful ovaries.
Yep, that happens a lot.
So many follicles. And you just you feel this sense of pride because you are taking all these shots and you're doing all this work and you just, thank you.
Right.
I never thought I wanted to compliment you beautiful ovaries, but it does feel good in that moment. So once you feel like you're about to burst, you will probably be looking at step 4. Step 4 is egg retrieval. Ladies, this is surgery. So don't get it twisted. This is surgery. It's outpatient surgery. It takes about 30 minutes. But this is where they're going to get...
You still go under.
Yeah, you go under, and this is where they're going to get all those follicles and see how many eggs you have.
Poop them out.
Yep. Gross. Ew, honey.
Yeah, that's what they said.
Oh, okay. So, really, the actual procedure, we're not scooping anything out, is they are draining, they're taking the ovarian follicles out. So they do, put a tube up there, they retrieve them, they're drained, and the fluid is sent to the lab to find eggs. The eggs are drawn out of the follicles, and then before you leave that day, you will know how many eggs you got. And so that's really cool because you're like, oh my God, I've worked so hard, had all these follicles, how many eggs do we have? Something important we should talk about. So you're getting close, you're getting done with your medication calendar. It will change based on your egg retrieval date. But 3 days before the surgery, you have to have a trigger shot.
Bum, bum, bum.
Trigger shot. And so this is intramuscular, and they will mark on your, almost like your backside, but your thigh. I'm not explaining it.
It depends on where they want to mark it down. But it's going to be on your back. It could be like on your posterior. It could also be like directly over, kind of closer to your tailbone. But they will mark the spot for you. Don't go in there guessing. They do that for you because, like I said, this is the 7-gauge needle.
Yeah.
This is the deeply painful and uncomfortable needle. And they don't mess around with it. They also will give you the instructions that you need to be able to actually perform the shot appropriately. And I'm going to go ahead and give you a quick overview of that because it's very important. It's you gotta really make sure that you nail that X where they mark it down. And then even if your partner flinches, and they will because it's a huge needle. You gotta you get in there and then you pull back on that plunger, and if you see bubbles, that's good. That's a good thing. You want to see bubbles, so you pull back just a skosh on that plunger to the point where you see bubbles, and then push the rest of that fluid back down in there, and then try and exit as smoothly as you can. And very, very importantly, when you pull back on that plunger, if you start to see a whole lot of blood in there, you did it wrong. And
basically, you don't want blood.
No, it's okay to have blood at the puncture site. That's okay. I freaked out a little bit because we got some blood at the puncture site, but that's fine. That's not an issue. The issue is if there's any blood inside of the actual syringe as you're pulling that plunger back. If that happens, pull that needle out and then just put pressure on that thing. And buy your wife some flowers.
And ladies, I will say the first time we did this, I decided, I'm gonna watch in the mirror.
Don't do that.
It's not smart. Not smart.
No.
And we did get blood, but it was not inside the needle the first time.
Nope.
A couple of times, what we had happen was really abnormal. We did the trigger shot. And then they will do your blood work the next day, of course, because why would you miss a day of blood work during an IVF cycle? No. They will make sure it got into your body because they cannot do that surgery without the trigger shot.
Exactly.
And a couple times for us, we know we did it. We did it, and it didn't work. It didn't show up in my body.
It didn't take somehow.
No one could explain why, but that did happen a couple times. That could happen, just FYI. If that does happen, then your egg retrieval day will change. And
if you're looking for an explanation, don't bother, because even the people over at Fertility Center of Maryland, they were just like, no, it didn't show up.
Oh, okay.
That's weird.
Do it again.
And it's just instead of being like, here's reasons why, they're just like, no, but the human body is weird. So
great. Thanks
awesome.
So much. And so then, ladies, just know you will need to take off that day for egg retrieval. You're gonna be.
You don't want to go back to work.
You're gonna be in some pain afterwards. Another really fun thing that happened that we learned I had. Now, keep in mind, I had major knee surgery at 19, and I had no complications with anesthesia. Everything was fine, so I was not nervous to go in for surgery. I just wanted my eggs.
You were cool as a cucumber.
Yeah. Until after the first time.
Right.
Because, my mom came with me. Aaron had to work that day. And I will never forget, I'm talking to my mom in the waiting room. And all of a sudden, I just said, I feel weird.
Yeah.
And she saw my lips turn blue. And
blood
then
pressure
I just
dropped.
passed out. And so I woke up and I had my fertility specialist who, they try to maintain that calm demeanor. They're not going to act like they're freaked out, but I could tell she was freaked out.
She was freaked out.
The anesthesiologist was super freaked out. And she started, basically yelling at me, do you have a heart condition?
Yeah.
Do you have seizures? Do you have sleep apnea?
Literally none of those things.
No, but now you're freaking me out. Well, you need to get tested for all of those things. So what it was is I have a vasovagal response.
Correct.
Vasovagal.
Good job. First try.
Thank you, honey. Do you want to tell everybody what that is?
Vasovagal response is effectively just when your body starts to freak out and kind of just goes into panic mode, and your blood pressure drops, your heart rate goes like crazy, and for you, That's effectively what happened. So you were just like freezing cold and shivering, and we had to just like load on like blankets and put socks on. And we, I believe the really nice nurses even brought over like heated blankets.
Yeah.
They were really good about it, and it was so funny because after you had done that the first time, they got used to you. It's just like, oh, Chrissie's coming in. Oh, the vasovagal one. Yeah, the vasovagal one. And,
and I had different anesthesiologists because you have them. You know, they trade off on who's there for that day of the egg retrieval.
But you were all charted up, so they knew what to expect.
Still, I told them.
Right, of course.
The best one I have is like this Russian guy, and like it didn't faze him at all.
No,
so
he's a Russian dude.
That was great. But I did. I did have it every time. And so,
without fail.
Without fail. So just know that can happen. The other thing is, you know, it's really nice when you have a little fertility center and they have Mobile or something inspirational as you're looking up at the ceiling, getting your anesthesia with your hoo-ha, hanging out, getting ready to have, you know, a tube inserted. And that was just a nice plus. I will say, ladies, because I'm a part of several IVF groups, a lot of us going through this journey, it's really hard to get a lot of good quality eggs and follicles. I had a lady post the other day, I was only expecting 1 or 2. I got 68 follicles and 32 eggs. And we're all just like, ugh, seriously? Like, you know, because for us, like, we were lucky if we ended up with 1 at the end. Whereas even if we ended up with, you know, 30 follicles and then we got 12 really good eggs, when we got to the final, we usually only ended up with 1 or 2.
Yep.
So that is step 4, egg retrieval. Honey, I think we should take a break.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and take a break before we reach step 5.
Before we take a break, we just want to give a shout out to Clovercrest Media.
Those guys are awesome.
Who we are now a part of. We're so happy to be a part of the Clovercrest family. And ready for a break when you are, dear.
Sounds good. When we come back, step 5. Okay, great. Awesome. We're doing great.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel?
Good. How do you feel?
Fantastic. All right, so now that we're all the way back here, I'm just going to start us back up again.
Okay.
3, 2, 1. And we are back with the Pros and Cons podcast. All right, sweetie. When we left off, we had just talked about step 4, which was egg retrieval. We went through all that.
Yes.
We are now on to step 5, which is fertilization.
Fertilization. So, ladies, while you're in your surgery, so usually that day, this is your partner's turn. They're going to go and they're going to give their sample, their man gravy.
That's right. See, even you're using it now. That's so gross.
Gross. The man gravy. They're going to give the sample. And they do have like instructions you have to follow before surgery. You will get those instructions.
And those instructions are relatively easy for us. I mean, like, come on, guys. At the end of the day, this is way harder for the ladies. Right. All we have to do is not be sexually active for 2 days prior to, but also don't wait too long because then you're going to get like kind of backed up. And part of the problem is like backed up. That's a real thing. You can get backed up, and that's unhealthy for your sperm as well. You don't want to do that. So you want to have like 2 day break for 0 sexual activity, like whatsoever.
No masturbation.
Right. Correct. And if unfortunately, like if you're prone to maybe having an issue like where that happens to you in your sleep, you're gonna have to let them know that, and you're gonna have to do something to be able to figure out how to keep yourself from being stimulated at night. I'm sure that there are steps to take. I don't have that problem. It was just, for me, the issue was not being sexually active for 2 days. That was kind of rough. But that's okay as far as things go. And then they will give you instructions, and it's a very, nice private situation. They even schedule guys when they come in, they will want to make sure that there's nobody else in that area. So you have your own little suite that you go into with typically a very comfortable chair with, just like the hospital paper over it to try to keep it sanitary. They will give you material.
Like we talked about last time.
Right. And then you go into a cup, and it's pretty simple stuff. And then you leave that cup, you put your name on it, you date it, you leave that right there, you leave the suite, and typically there's nobody out there at all. They don't look at you because they're just like, we know what you did. It's like, come on, guys. We all know why we're here. But it's okay. They try to be as discreet as possible with the guys with this stuff. It's kind of odd how much they coddle us and how much the ladies are kind of like just batted about. Yeah.
And so you will be introduced. So while your partner, does that, however, whether he does it before your surgery, during your surgery, before your surgery, you meet with your fertility specialist, your anesthesiologist, and you get introduced to probably the most important person in this process, and that is the embryologist.
Mm-hmm.
And the embryologist, their role, they come into play after the egg retrieval, is to monitor, help develop, and update you about your embryos. So once the guys provide the man gravy, that gets added to your eggs, and then you want it to be fertilized because that's your baby in there. Like, that's your embryo, your baby.
Mm-hmm.
And so embryologists are amazing because even when you have super low motility and your sperm are not that many, like, Aaron did.
My situation, like I was at, I think the highest I ever got to was like 23%.
Yeah, and that was way at the end. I mean, early on, when we're talking about our first cycle, it was like 9 or 10%.
Yeah.
And so we had an awesome embryologist. And those quality of embryos is critical. So a term you hear a lot is 5-day blastocyst.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make it to 5-day blastocyst. I remember thinking, like, why is that important? What is that? What does that mean? It is critical because basically what happens is once they fertilize and you have those embryos, your embryologist is seeing how they develop. And so your cells are dividing, they're splitting within that embryo. And if they can make it to day 5 on their own, that's going to give them the best chance of being able to develop into a healthy baby when they get put back in your body. So you will hear they want to make it to 5 days before they go back inside of you. For our first round, we didn't have any quality embryos. We ended up having a pokey embryo. They called it that, pokey.
I thought that was a fantastic way of saying it.
Right, and we're like, we're going to read
pokey.
it the pokey puppy. And no. So they did put ours back in on day 2 or day 3. I forget which one now, but of course it did not take because they were not quality embryos.
Because while pokey sounds nice and cute and stuff and almost endearing, you don't want that because it typically doesn't work. Correct.
And so you will talk to your embryologist every day. Our embryologist was amazing. We talked about Aaron's varicocele last time, and we had no idea it could grow back. Our last cycle with Fertility Center in Maryland, we got to this point with egg retrieval and fertilization, and he had almost no sperm at all because his veins had grown back. Do you want to tell them what the embryologist did, dear? How the one looked like they were asleep?
It was so funny because the one lady was just like, I looked at all of them, and one by one they kind of just died, and then this one he was just went like, and I guess he was the one, and I was just like, I'm sorry, what did he do? And she was just like, like, oh no.
I thought he might have some life in him. So that was the one.
Yep.
And so the other thing is you will get pressure to freeze any remaining embryos. They will ask you that.
It costs money, but
so please know that costs a whole lot extra.
Yeah.
We got pressure to do that.
It's almost like they upsell you on it.
Yeah, and I mean I get it because you don't want to have to go through this process again.
It does make sense.
And if you have some good quality ones, you want to freeze them. So the only time we were ever able to freeze was our round 2, and we literally had one quality embryo and one to freeze.
That was it.
And so we did do that, and then know that with some fertility centers, then there's a defrosting fee.
Right. They will just find it's almost like going to a car mechanic. Well, they kind of just find any reason to, parts and labor and all that stuff.
Absolutely. And so you're at this point now, you're talking to your embryologist every day. They're seeing how they look, and now you're going to prepare yourself for embryo transfer. And this day is like Christmas and Disneyland, like wrapped in one, because you know you're getting the start of a baby inside of you, and you know that could be your baby.
That's right.
And so they will schedule that. And no, you don't have to take off of work that day. I did and I didn't, depending on the cycle. They used to recommend you lie in bed. Afterwards, they do not recommend that anymore. They want you moving around. But this is where your embryo is getting put back inside of you. You will have a lot of emotions. You will get a time. They will ask you to go in with a full bladder. Be careful that it's not too full, and then you have to refill, because sometimes your time gets pushed back based off of...
It's a doctor's office, so...
Right. And so then you're back there, and you have your fertility specialist, your embryologist, maybe a nurse assisting, and your partner or whoever you choose to bring with you. They will tell you the number of embryos and have you sign off. Now, a lot of people think, oh, I want as many as possible. Most fertility specialists will not do that.
That's correct.
They will only put one in because, they want you to have a healthy pregnancy, and it's just not recommended to do more than one. And then they're going to insert a tube through your cervix, and I think they shoot some dye up there, and you can watch on the screen. Now, my fertility specialist was amazing, but she learned real quick how weird my body is. And so on one of our, times, I want to say it was like our second transfer, because I don't think she did the first one. I think it was the other doctor.
Yeah, I think you're correct.
It's the second transfer. And I remember going through this process, and of course it's painful. And she says, oh, we need to rearrange some things. And I'm like, oh, great. Okay.
That was just like the craziest way of describing that.
You're going to get this out of me, right?
No. You're staying right there.
No. And I'm like, oh, my God. And then they had to twist my cervix. Gross.
Oh, man.
And painful.
Yeah,
Ouch.
yeah.
And they had to use a different tube. And so Aaron was watching.
Dear God, guys. Dear God. I was just watching as the doctor just would grab like a giant metal implement off the table, and I'm up by Chrissie's head holding her hand while all this is happening, because it's a lot of pinching
painful,
and stuff.
Yes.
So all I see is these like giant silver metal implements just being disappeared. So they would just pick one up off the table and then put it, in there, and then leave it there, because they would come back with nothing in their hands, and they would do that for a while. and then I'm just like, Chrissie's more machine than lady now. Like, what's happening? Oh.
Yeah, and so eventually you will get to the point where then the embryologist comes over and you watch them. They show you on the screen where they're aiming to put the embryo, and you watch them
build like almost like a railroad tracks up your cervix.
Yeah, and then they'll drop it off, and the embryologist will make sure the tube is clear, that the embryo's up there, and then you're allowed to go to the bathroom.
And after that, that's why it's good to have a full bladder, but not so full that you're sitting there, in way more pain than you need to be.
Absolutely. And so then it's like super exciting, because you're like, oh my God, my baby is inside of me. And you try to do everything you possibly can, to make sure it's a loving environment. But then, you will make yourself think you're pregnant, and experience a lot of symptoms, and you have a 2-week wait. So a 2-week wait for your pregnancy test.
And some of the symptoms that you're experiencing might be from hormones. It also might be, psychosomatic, which is to say.
Could be because you're about to get your period.
It could be that. Also, like there's just so many things. So just like if you start to, don't look for it.
Right.
If you start to feel like you're feeling these symptoms, just be like, okay, good. Don't like actively think to myself like, is this morning sickness, or am I just really don't feel like I want to go to work today.
Unlike me, every time I thought I was pregnant.
Yes.
Every single time.
Every single time.
I convinced myself of these symptoms. So the first time we did not take a pregnancy test, beforehand, and then I remember being like devastated. Every other time since then, we took a pregnancy test. Don't take it too early though. And if you're gonna take a pregnancy test before, you go into your doctor's office, make sure you use first response.
Yes. First
And
response,
I would only
absolutely.
do a couple days before, because if not, you're just gonna put yourself through a lot of emotions.
And yeah, you just don't need to do that to yourself.
And so, this is a really, really tough thing to do. If anybody's gone through it, we commend you. Hopefully you got a baby out of it, or more than one. We did not all the times we went through. And, it was just really hard. It was really hard to just have the bills and the emotional toll it takes on you without the excitement of the end result.
That's right. So it does take that toll on you, and especially because you feel like you've done so much,
right?
And you really have, ladies especially. Guys, if you're good at your job, you will also feel like you've been through a lot,
right?
And so it's rough. You have this real big empty feeling inside.
I just did all this work for nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then
and it costs how much?
Right. And then they'll immediately go into next steps.
Right.
Let's start it.
Let's start over again.
And so you can determine, together if you want to move forward.
And that's entirely up to you guys. We went through 6 rounds. That was spread out over the course of how long?
Yeah, it feels like forever.
Right. So
several years.
Yeah, a couple of years.
Now, one of the rounds was for our embryo adoption, and we are going to get into that in episode 4, because we thought we'd take you through each episode the route that we went on. So for our journey, we started out with surgeries, then we tried to foster to adopt, and then we went to IVF. And so within attempting to adopt is where we found out about embryo adoption. So that's a little preview for episode 4. We want to thank you so much for being with us. We would love to hear your stories, your questions, your comments. So feel free to just comment on YouTube or, on our Facebook posts, wherever. We are here for you. We're turning our mess into our message, so others don't feel like they have to be so alone.
And I'm going to go ahead and throw up my work email for you guys at the end of this. It's just so you guys have another avenue to get in touch with us if you'd like.
Yeah.
All right, guys. This has been Aaron and CHrissie Kahn for the Pros and Cons podcast. This is episode 3.
And again, we want to shout out to our new family,
Clovercrest Media. How cool are you guys?
And of course, the amazing CSB, Connecticut School of Broadcasting.
For their awesome facilities.
Right, we would not be here.
That's correct. All right, everybody. Have an awesome weekend and be good to each other.
And I think to myself, what a wonderful world.